Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, since they've already introduced me, I want to introduce myself again. Okay, I'll begin fast, short and sharp. Okay, some background. So IRAS actually embarked on our cloud-native journey in 2019. Okay, we started redeveloping our core system into a microservices architecture system. Okay. One of the fundamental principles that we adopted, okay, was that we will leverage on cloud-native services. That is SaaS or PaaS, whenever possible. Okay. Okay, some of the observed benefits that we saw since 2019 was that we had a shortened turnaround time to set up systems. Okay. There is actually improved availability, maintainability, and scalability. As well as we managed to achieve near zero downtime. Not zero downtime, but near. Okay, maybe I go into each of those points. Okay, for shortened turnaround time, okay, when we use PaaS and SaaS, there is a reduced turnaround time and effort, okay, which we would otherwise spend on like installing, hardening, patching, upgrading the softwares and the hardware. Okay, so all that was actually removed with the use of PaaS and SaaS. Okay, and normally when we set up like software on hardware, we would need to do some customizations along the way. Okay, with SaaS and PaaS, those are not possible. That means they most probably only allow you to do configuration, but not customizations. Okay, so the issues with having to upgrade systems that have been customized are also inadvertently or indirectly removed since we can't do customizations. Okay. Okay, the second thing about availability. Okay. We actually enhance availability with the use of availability zones. Okay, the system was actually developed on Azure. That's why we use availability zones. Maybe not all of the CSP use availability zones, but the concept is there. Okay. Okay, the PaaS and SaaS resources, we also selected those that meet our own availability requirements. Because not all SaaS and PaaS have the same availability. Okay, most probably it's published in the SaaS or the CSP providers website. You know, some is 99.9, some is 99.99, some is 5.9. So depending on what is the availability of the end system, you have to choose the PaaS service that best meets your availability requirements without having to incur additional costs whenever possible. Okay, in terms of maintainability, okay, effort is reduced because we don't need to patch or upgrade the PaaS or the SaaS. This is done by the PaaS or the SaaS provider. Okay, so most of the upgrades are transparent to the end user like us. You see, they will upgrade it in the background, and the only thing that we need to do is testing. Testing is something that cannot be removed. Whether you use or you don't use PaaS and SaaS, you still need to test whenever there's upgrade or patches. Oh, sorry, I didn't go through some of the lessons. Yeah, we better go back. Sorry. So for the shortened turnaround time, one of the lessons that we learned was that proficiency in SaaS and PaaS configuration is required. That means you need to, there's reduced time in installation and all this, but you need to spend time to learn about the PaaS and SaaS, okay, how to configure them and things like that. Okay. Because the default setup of the PaaS and SaaS may not be optimal for your application requirements, or it may not meet your security requirements. So you need to learn about those and then set it up accordingly. Okay, for availability, okay, like what I mentioned earlier, okay, even though we use PaaS and SaaS, the availability is not 100%. No vendor will guarantee 100%. You know, even 5.9s, there is still a 0.0001%. So there is still a failure. And because it's PaaS and SaaS, the failure will be the entire system may not be available. Okay? Or it may not be available in the region that we are in, where we deploy our services. So those things you need to have a plan B. You know, either it's a manual plan, like the service is not available, what you do in the meantime. Okay, because there's, if it's our own system, you can like bring more hardware in, do whatever or whatever. No, but it's a PaaS and SaaS. There's nothing much we can do in the background besides logging a severity one to the vendor and then asking them, please solve this faster. You know, but on the other side, you are also not alone. You know, because everybody that's using the PaaS and SaaS that's down will be enjoying the same goodness that you're enjoying, all at the same time. Okay. Okay, in terms of maintainability, we try not to use undocumented features. Most of the developers nowadays are very proficient, they will find features that are not documented, and they will start using it. So you need to be careful when you do that, because those undocumented features may disappear with the next upgrade or patch. Okay, so if you really, really love that feature so much, my advice is you log an issue, ask the vendor, either they say that it's officially supported or they put it in their documentation. If not, then you have to assess the risk, because it might not be there the next time they do the upgrade. Okay, so in terms of scalability, most PaaS and SaaS services allow scaling, okay? But there are constraints or conditions you need to be aware of, okay? Because scaling is not indefinite, okay? And with scaling comes cost. So you need to have the mentality that you need to tune the application properly. If the application is not tuned, your next month's bill might suddenly blossom. And then you might find that your boss will ask you why the bill this month is like 10 times last month, because your application suddenly run amok, run haywire because of some endless loop or things like that. Okay, and you need to be aware of the cloud service limits. Not all cloud service have the same limits. It means some, maybe they say that in this region, Southeast Asia, you can only grow to this scale. Beyond that, it is not supported. So you need to be aware of all this. Okay, and find the PaaS and SaaS that meets your scaling requirements. Because you might love the PaaS and SaaS a lot, but if it can't scale to meet your requirements, then it's pointless. You will be stuck when you need to scale there. You will still need to look for alternatives anyway at that point in time. Okay, in terms of zero downtime, so downtime is actually optimized by the availability provided by the service provider for the PaaS and SaaS. Okay. So there's no need for you to buy a lot of hardware, buy a lot of network equipment, put them together in a mesh or whatever to get the availability that you want. Okay? You just choose the concoction or the mix that meets your requirements, and then you'll be achieving the downtime that you want. Okay? The other thing from the application perspective, okay, using DevOps actually allows the deployment of automated pipelines, okay, to scan your code, to deploy your code. Okay, and also infrastructure as code is something that you might want to leverage on in the future, okay, when you go to cloud, because then your infrastructure is deployed just like code, and you manage it just like code. Okay. Okay. One thing to note is not all SaaS and PaaS support the concept of blue-green deployment. So you might need to find the mix that meets your requirements. If you really want to achieve blue-green, that means very, very, very low downtime. Okay. Okay, some of the additional lessons learned. Okay, the PaaS and SaaS may evolve over time, and the users like us need to be aware. Okay, it might be things like licensing changes. Okay, like today the PaaS and SaaS might be licensed on per user. The next day, the vendor might just tell you, oh, we have changed our licensing scheme. Now is by per terabyte of data access, or per terabyte of storage use. Then your costs would change. So these are some of the things you need to be aware of when you move towards a SaaS and PaaS or cloud native deployment. Okay, because when the vendors change their licensing, there's nothing much end users like us can do short of you don't use their product and move to something else. Okay, the other thing is when you use SaaS, maybe some PaaS also, okay, data patching, which we are used to when we have our own systems, may not be something that is supported. Okay, that means the SaaS user might not say that, no, I don't allow you to do bug patching. You can't just give me a file and expect me back end to do the patching for you. I can't do that, maybe because of certain legal requirements or whatever. They can't like that patch the system for you at the back end. So you need to be aware of such lack of data patching features. And you need to build your application to handle this if you really need this feature. Okay, the last thing, I think this is last slide already. As per currently, most of us would love everything to be on PaaS and SaaS if everything works equally well when you use PaaS and SaaS as when you use IRAS. That means we deploy it on the hardware. But the hardware approach is more mature for some products compared to PaaS and SaaS. That means the containers and things like that. you will need to balance between whether you can accept a little less immature products in exchange for some of the benefits that we observe. Okay. Yeah, depending on your risk appetite. Okay. Okay. So like what I mentioned earlier, cloud-native services have benefits, but you need to be aware that there are limitations and trade-offs. So we need to go in with our eyes open. Okay? And take time maybe to prepare, to learn about those constraints and trade-offs and how the organization would like to address them. Okay? And you might also need to then talk to your users, because between what are business needs and what are business preferences or wants. The user may tell you, I need this, but is this really needed for the business or is their preference? I want this on the top right-hand corner, or I want this on the top bottom left. This might not be business requirements. So you might then need to engage your users and decide accordingly. Yep, that's all I have. Thank you.